Superhero cartoons have been a core part of the superhero genre almost as long as that genre has existed in its modern form. In Marvel's case, their meteoric rise to popularity began in the early 1960s with the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, and just a few years later, kids could turn on their TVs and watch their adventures on Saturday mornings. The most popular of these cartoons can even define the public perception of their star character just as much as the comics can. The Spider-Man cartoon from 1967 ran for 52 episodes, and even now, decades later, I'm willing to bet a huge chunk of the audience watching this video still knows the classic Spider-Man theme song by heart. The story I'm going to be telling today, though, is not from Marvel's first boom in the 1960s, though. No, we're going to be going forward to the 1970s, where their cartoons got a little bit weirder. Marvel put out a bunch of cartoons in the late 70s, releasing 4 new shows just in 1978 and 79. This batch was a far cry from just being adaptations of their most popular characters, though, and I'll present the 4 shows in, let's say, order of normalcy. First up was Spider-Woman. Yes, Jessica Drew briefly had her own cartoon, which was also Marvel's first animated show to have a female lead. Next up was the second version of the Fantastic Four show. Why do I call this weirder than Spider-Woman when the FF had a cartoon already before this? Well, it's because of the roster, which did not include Human Torch at all. Turns out that the movie and show rights for Johnny Storm specifically had a lot of complexity with them, and rather than address that, they just made a Fantastic Four show without him, instead introducing the character of Herbie to just replace Human Torch entirely. But if you think that's a weird take on the Fantastic Four, very shortly after this, The Thing would get his own solo cartoon, in which none of the other Fantastic Four members appeared at all, and he was also aged down into a teenager, and he wasn't made of orange rocks, except for sometimes because he had these things called the Thing Rings. I just gotta show you a clip of this one.
Thing Ring, do your thing!
So, from that clip especially, it's clear that Marvel was very willing to experiment with shows during this time, and not only with very weird interpretations of their popular characters, but also with lesser known characters being adapted to screen for the first time. And the best example of that is Xemnu from the Magic Planet. Admittedly, Xemnu is probably not a name that rings a lot of bells for people right now, but as the title of this video promises, give me a little bit of time and I'm confident I can reactivate some memories. Trust me, Xemnu is in all of your heads right now, I swear. Now, to tell you about the Xemnu and the Magic Planet cartoon itself, I need to do this properly and begin with Xemnu's first appearance in any Marvel media. To do that, we need to backtrack out of the 1970s before the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And I don't mean before their cartoons, we are going all the way back to the year 1960, before the F4 and Spider-Man ever appeared at all. Xemnu's first appearance was in a sci-fi and horror anthology comic called Journey into Mystery. Now, looking at the cover of this, there's already a lot of things that are weird, so let me address those questions. First off, a character from a horror anthology being adapted into a kid's cartoon, that sounds a little bit weird, but Marvel does this a lot, and to shocking success, with the best example being Groot. Yes, Groot first technically debuted in another horror anthology called Tales to Astonish, also published in 1960. So Marvel really likes taking these weird old horror characters and giving them fresh new spins. Xemnu is not the only one with this treatment. Anyway, second question, probably the bigger one. Why does this cover say the Hulk on it? That's not the Hulk, except he is. Xemnu actually had the title of the Hulk, sometimes extended to the Living Hulk, far before Bruce Banner debuted in 1962. See, back in these original horror anthology days, they had a new monster every issue, and those monsters often had a tagline associated with them, like Goliath, the monster that walks like a man, or Rorg, king of the spider monsters. And for Xemnu, his tagline was the Living Hulk. After all, Hulk is a word defined as a large or unwieldy object, usually in the context of boats apparently, and Xemnu's not a boat, but whatever. So then what is Xemnu the Living Hulk? Well, despite this cover featuring a scientist that says, "I've done it, I've created a living Hulk," Xemnu is not a Frankenstein's monster type situation, rather he's an alien. Of course, his actual storyline is pretty bare bones. I mean, it was 1/3 of one issue of a 1960s anthology, but it basically goes as follows. Xemnu is an alien criminal who escapes his prison planet on a supply ship, makes his way to Earth, and then uses his advanced technology to try and take over the planet before being foiled by a couple of Earthlings. Xemnu's very few other appearances before his animated debut follow this same general formula. This begs an obvious question. Based on these comics appearances, who on Earth thought it was a good idea to make a Xemnu cartoon? Now, let's skip back to the 1970s again. This time is, of course, decades before the MCU and Marvel's ownership by Disney, meaning that as well as Marvel was doing with their comics, they didn't have the resources to produce shows entirely on their own. Thus, like many other companies, even today, they would license out their characters and have other companies make the cartoons for them. The production company that ended up licensing Xemnu was called Agar Media. Unfortunately, information on Agar is harder to dig up than info on the show themselves. Best I can tell, Xemnu was the first animated show that they ever made. I believe they made some commercials or marketing materials before this, but this was their first foray into full-length media. Now, I'm going to be skipping ahead a little bit here, but trust me, the order in which I'm presenting this is going to make sense in context. Xemnu was also, again, as best I can tell from research, Agar's last foray into full-length media. There is technically a second show credited to the company called The Adventures of Chad Hammer, but I can find nothing on this. I obviously have clips from Xemnu that I'm going to be showing you shortly. Forget clips for Chad Hammer, I can't even find still images, so I don't know what this show was about. I would call it lost media, but I'm not even 100% sure that it ever made it to screen, so it might not have earned that title. The point of bringing that up is to show that Agar Media was not a big or particularly successful company. How they got the license to a Marvel property, I will never know. Maybe they were like a subsidiary of a larger company, or maybe Marvel just thought that Xemnu wasn't a relevant enough character that they were willing to take a risk. I have no idea, but what matters is not how they got the rights, it's what they did with them. The cartoon that Agar made actually shared a surprising amount of elements with the original 60s comic, with a more heroic spin on them. Xemnu was still an alien prisoner who escaped and made his way to Earth, but rather than being a criminal, he was enslaved by an evil empire that had taken over his homeworld, which is always just referred to simply as the Magic Planet. After arriving on Earth, Xemnu quickly took a liking to the tiny humans and vowed not to let this new planet meet the same dark fate as his old one. Pretty standard fare for a superhero cartoon, but Xemnu often took a more wholesome tone than many others did. Don't get me wrong, it was still a superhero cartoon, and Xemnu absolutely did get into fights, occasionally with other Marvel characters. Agar somehow secured the rights to Hulk for a single episode, probably just as a reference to Xemnu's original codename back in the 60s. But outside of these adventures, Xemnu often helped his human friends with less action-packed problems. The show really tried to cast him as a friendly, reliable, wholesome figure, a big fluffy guy that you could go to with any of your issues. If you were getting bullied at school, Xemnu was there for you. If your cat ran away, Xemnu was there for you. If your house burned down, Xemnu was there for you. If your parents died, Xemnu was there for you. If anything bad was happening, Xemnu was always there. And things were always so bad, weren't they? The point is, Xemnu was the best. He just wanted to help, and everyone in the show, outside of horrible villains and monsters, loved him. Unfortunately, this was less the case with audiences, as the Xemnu cartoon was not received very well, and Fortunately, this was absolutely the case with real audiences. Xemnu was a wildly popular show right from the jump, and Xemnu fever quickly began sweeping the nation. Audiences across America could not get enough of Xemnu from the Magic Planet. The show ran for many years, he started getting comics again, there were Xemnu toys, he was in everything. And this helped propel Marvel to new heights. In fact, many pop culture historians credit Xemnu as one of the major driving forces behind Marvel's rising popularity in following decades. Since Marvel owned the character, they were the ones who Agar Media's ownership of the Xemnu character skyrocketed the company's success almost overnight, and they immediately began capitalizing on it. Agar's second major character, Chad Hammer, also became incredibly popular to such an extent that he still gets new comics to this day. Though even as other Agar characters rose to prominence, especially with the dawn of the Agar cinematic universe, Xemnu remained their breakout star, and his comforting presence would be a constant for many, many years after his cartoon debut. You could find Xemnu on almost any household's TV screens every Saturday morning, every news broadcast, as reports of the noble alien's heroics only served to increase his reputation more and more. Everyone relied on Xemnu, everyone trusted him, and for good reason. He absolutely earned it. Things were simply better when Xemnu was around, there's no other way to put it. Even as the state of the world deteriorated into economic collapse and disease and non-stop war, Xemnu remained, and you could always just turn on your TV and he would be right there, reminding you that everything was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay with Xemnu. You remember that feeling, right? You remember? Think harder. Xemnu had so quickly become such an important, beloved figure in everyone's lives that it was hard to believe he had only arrived on Earth a few years ago, but it was... Xemnu had always been around, of course. The only thing that's hard to believe is that it had taken him so long to get his own cartoon. Xemnu from the Magic Planet was Xemnu trying out a new form of media, reaching the younger generation as a way to give them pleasant childhood memories that they could look back on. Whenever things got rough, just think back to your friend Xemnu from the Magic Planet. Everything's going to be okay with him. But you don't remember that, do you? You don't remember Xemnu. You've never seen Xemnu from the Magic Planet. Maybe you should think harder again. After all, don't you want to remember? I mean, look around at the world. Look at any news. There's new horror stories from every part of the world. Every second it feels like. It wasn't like that before. It wasn't like that with Xemnu. When you were just sitting in front of your TV watching Xemnu from the Magic Planet, everything felt okay. Everything felt right because Xemnu was there for you. Things can be like that again, you know. They don't have to be this. Xemnu doesn't want them to be this. Xemnu wants to help you. All you have to do is remember. Just close your eyes. Take a second. Close your eyes. Remember what it was like. Remember Xemnu from the Magic Planet. Remember. And everything is going to be okay.
Oh me, oh my. You all know me, don't you, boys and girls? Xemnu, from the Magic Planet. Remember? For the job and the family that you hate. Before everything got so hard. Remember Saturday morning television? The smell of a new plastic toy? Remember being happy? Then you remember me.
Hey everybody. What's with all the equipment being set up? We're not filming anything today. I only came into the studio because I accidentally forgot to pick up my... Why does everyone look so scared? Oh, right. Well, my sincerest apologies, everyone. Seems we had a little tiny bit of psychic interference on the channel today. I have reviewed all of the footage that was filmed before I arrived, and good news, you're all going to be fine. Probably. Maybe just avoid watching any old cartoons for a bit just in case, but I think you're gonna be fine. And since we're all here already, I might as well finish up the lore that was being talked about. I have some level of obligation to. As many of you have probably already worked out, Xemnu from the Magic Planet is not and never was a real cartoon, but Xemnu is an actual character. So let's talk about what's actually up with him. Not everything stated in the first part of this video was a lie. Xemnu did actually debut in Marvel's Journey into Mystery anthology back in 1960, and everything that I said about his origin was accurate. He was an alien criminal who made his way to Earth and attacked people with advanced technology. He just used mind control technology specifically, which was a detail that I chose to leave out. Xemnu's original goal was enslaving humanity and forcing them to build him a new spaceship, which he could then use to return to his homeworld. A relatively benign goal, except for the fact that the ship was so powerful, launching it would also destroy the entire planet. This plan worked for a shockingly long time. Xemnu was able to construct the ship, but at the last second, one scientist managed to escape the aliens' control and lower the power output on it, meaning that the Earth was not destroyed and the inadequately powered ship left Xemnu stranded in space. For like 3 issues. Despite his simplicity, Xemnu was apparently popular enough to almost immediately get a sequel story in which he returns to Earth by using telekinesis to pull an asteroid into the path of his drifting ship, bouncing off of it and careening back to the planet, because comics in the 60s were not very complicated. This also is not the only time Xemnu uses telekinesis in this comic, and his specific type of telekinesis is flavored in one of the weirdest ways ever. Right at the end, he tells a guy that he's going to, quote, hypnotize your very atoms and make them fall apart. So that's how his telekinesis works. He hypnotizes inanimate matter, and when this guy turns a mirror on Xemnu as the hypnosis is happening, the mirror and hypnosis just causes Xemnu to disintegrate instead. So he's gone more definitively. This, so far, does not cast Xemnu as a particularly scary figure. He's a horror character, sure, but in an extremely campy 60s sci-fi kind of way. The type of horror that I set up with the beginning of this video does not start happening until his next appearance 10 years later. In 1972, Xemnu was the villain of a Defenders comic, where he has returned to Earth once again. Quite an impressive feat, given that he was disintegrated at a molecular level before this. How on earth did he achieve that, you might be wondering? Well, apparently, Xemnu was able to keep himself collected in a gaseous form, which then drifted into space and possessed an astronaut. The Xemnu particles then transformed that man's biology into a new Xemnu body controlled by the original. Now the horror is starting to happen. This comic is also the one that introduces Xemnu's TV theme. Once he has returned to Earth the second time, the population does not remember his previous plots. They were erased from collective memory when the hypnosis ended. Thus, Xemnu has taken a sort of undercover position on a TV show. To be fully detailed, this show was not a cartoon in the original. It was a live-action variety kids show called, The Astronauts, but both because of that name and because I thought the cartoon version of this would be easier to sell in the beginning part of this video, I decided to flip it to a slightly more modern angle. Speaking of which, shout out to the French Pineapple, who is the artist that I worked with to draw the fake Xemnu shots for you. They did a fantastic job at, helping me lie to you guys better. Anyway, the alien invader joined the Astronauts as Xemnu from the Magic Planet, a fun, friendly alien whose whole gimmick was that he wanted to return to his homeworld, but would be constantly foiled by various slapstick shenanigans. Importantly, the show was bad. Like, in-universe, it was horrible. It was badly written, it wasn't funny, but kids really, really liked it for reasons that no one could particularly pin down. And surprise, surprise, that was because of Xemnu. See, Xemnu had figured out that his hypnotic abilities worked through TV signals, and with a far more practical form of mass control now at his fingertips, he began digging his way into the minds of children across America. This played out like I set up in the intro. His show was an immediate hit, there were toys, everybody loved Xemnu, and of course, he had ulterior motives. Across the comic, Xemnu appears in several very effectively creepy panels in which he promises the young viewers of his show that when he returns to the Magic Planet, he will take a select few kids with him. The real goal of this is using whatever Xemnu particles he is composed of to transform those children into members of his species that he can use to repopulate his apparently deserted homeworld. His plan is foiled by the Defenders, of course, specifically the Hulk, who counters Xemnu thanks to the fact that his mind is simply too chaotic to be hypnotized. This is going to be a very important plot point in later books, so keep it in mind. This was only a one-off comic. Xemnu was not the villain for an entire arc, but as short as this appearance was, I find its horror fascinating from a writing perspective. Remember, this book was released in 1972, and yet it bears a shocking similarity to modern mascot and analog horror. This is not a genre that I'm super well versed in, but even people like myself who don't play Five Nights at Freddy's or consume similar media know the general vibe of it, and Xemnu really reminds me of that. A big, fluffy, mascot-like character sending unsettling, hypnotic messages to kids through an innocent-looking TV show with the goal of eventually kidnapping and transforming those kids into aliens. You can take that exact plot from this comic beat for beat and put it into a modern indie game and nobody would question it for a second. This isn't even Xemnu's best and scariest horror appearance, not by a long shot. Most of this video is going to be on that from here on out, but there are a few more smaller arcs that I do want to address quickly. Xemnu's next several appearances are less horror-themed, but keep the same general concept. He's a big, scary alien who tries to hypnotize and kidnap people, usually by projecting his hypnotic powers through mass media in some way or another. He usually goes up against Hulk or some other bruiser-type character, but Xemnu's wide range of abilities makes him a pretty versatile opponent. He obviously has all of the mental things, but enough size and strength that he can fight anybody. Xemnu also gains a sort of secret identity during this time, not a traditional one, but he does use his weird gas form powers to possess the body of a movie director named Amos Moses. During this time, he hypnotizes and controls Wonder Man, and my god, what I would give for Xemnu to be one of the villains of the upcoming Wonder Man MCU show. I don't think that's going to happen, but on the off chance it does, I just had to put it in this video so that I can claim I was right. Xemnu's next lore-relevant appearance would be as a recurring villain in the 80s sensational She-Hulk series, where he would continue his theme of trying to kidnap and transform children, this time with his target being the baby of US-1, who is a space trucker? US-1 is a very silly guy, and this is meant to be a Halloween horror video, so I'm not going to entirely derail the tone by talking about him, at least not today, but he is a regular human who essentially acquired a space truck and then also became a weird superhero because of it. Xemnu kidnaps his pregnant wife and hooks her up to a machine that's supposed to transform the baby before it's born. This leads him into conflict with She-Hulk, and that leads to the reason I have to bring this arc up in the first place, which is that She-Hulk falls into the machine instead, and this happens. Xemnu then decides, this is good enough, I don't have a baby, but now She-Hulk can be the bride of Xemnu. Look, we all know why this storyline and arc got made, right? I'm not gonna talk about it, but there's only one explanation for this kind of thing. We all know why. Jen would get fixed almost immediately. Thank God this was not a very long arc, as someone just had to get their interest in when they had the opportunity, I suppose. Point of this being, Xemnu was treated as a comedic character here. He was not really a horror guy, and that is more or less how he would be for his next few appearances. Xemnu was a bit for the next several years. He would appear with some regularity, but never in any serious way. Maybe he would be just another big monster for Hulk to punch. There was one time where he was a side character, Rocket Raccoon met in an intergalactic prison. He was not horror anymore. But a few years after all these appearances, that would change radically. In 2018, Marvel would begin publishing a comic called The Immortal Hulk, written by Al Ewing. Immortal Hulk is one of the best Marvel comics of the last decade, maybe one of the best Marvel comics ever. I am not exaggerating, it really is that good. It is a horror comic first and foremost. Very gross body horror too. Immortal Hulk really plays on the idea that turning into the Hulk is a disgusting thing to watch. Whatever you're going to be seeing on your screens during this portion of the video, know that it goes way harder than that. I just don't want to get this video demonetized, which I think some of the content in this book definitely would do. Beyond just being very well-written horror, though, Immortal Hulk is also a fascinating character study into Bruce Banner. This series definitively established that Bruce has dissociative identity disorder caused by childhood trauma at the hands of his father. The gamma radiation he was exposed to didn't just turn him into an angry green guy. What it actually did was give more independence and physical form to the alternate identities that existed within his mind. In particular, the raging, simplistic, almost childlike Hulk that is the most known status quo is seen as a literal representation not of Bruce just being mad, but of the rage he felt as a child towards his father that he was unable to do anything about since he was only a kid. This is sad, it's interesting, and most importantly for our purposes, it is the perfect setup for Xemnu to take the stage once again. Not as a joke character, but back to full form as a horror villain. One of the main overarching villains of the entire Immortal Hulk series is a Minotaur businessman. A silly concept, but trust me, he is absolutely terrifying. This guy is the CEO of Roxxon, Marvel's premier megacorporation, and his name is Dario Agger. That name might ring a bell for some of you guys. Agger understands that even with his Minotaur strength, he cannot take the Hulk in an all-out brawl, so he goes for another strategy, ruining Hulk's public image, which shockingly was actually decent at the time. To do this, though, he's going to need a Hulk of his own, and so he turns to Xemnu. Agger seeks Xemnu out, brings him onto the team, and with the aliens' help, stages a full-on kaiju monster attack that Xemnu is able to overdramatically stop. Of course, Xemnu's hypnosis is what is controlling these monsters in the first place. All of this is completely staged, but Hulk doesn't know that. Thus, Xemnu descends from the skies to save the day, and as he does, people remember him, because of course they do. He's Xemnu from the Magic Planet, one of the most beloved figures from their childhood. Now that he's here, everything's going to be fine. Who would think otherwise? This is where we get the terrifying Xemnu monologue that I had a lot of fun voicing earlier. Agger Media was my own little addition. I threw that in as an Easter egg because I knew where this was going, but I cannot claim writing credit for this. That is right out of the pages of the comic. Now remember, several minutes ago I told you to remember that Hulk's mind is too chaotic for Xemnu to hypnotize. That is still the case. Xemnu's control does not work on Hulk effectively in this moment, and Hulk, recognizing Xemnu as somebody that he's fought a million times before, immediately starts throwing hands. But this is exactly what Agger wanted to happen. In Hulk's mind, this is just a normal hero versus villain fight. He has no idea what's happening, but in the minds of the hypnotized and horrified public, they are watching the Hulk beat the ever-living shit out of one of their most beloved childhood heroes. And as Xemnu looks into the camera and begs for some sort of help, he, quote, loses control on the monsters he had, quote, subdued, and the attack begins again. Even Hulk's own allies begin to turn on him as Xemnu's influence grows, and the alien's power eventually reaches such a height that the Hulk no longer exists, at least not in anyone's memory. Rather than remembering the Hulk as anything, positive or negative, Xemnu has simply replaced him entirely, along with any other heroes that might get in his way. The public just remembers Xemnu, and all the great feats of the past are credited to him. Xemnu is now the hero, and always has been. He's who people remember. He's been with them since their childhood. He's an Avenger in the history of the world. Hell, he's even reclaimed the name Incredible Hulk as a publication callback to his name in the 60s. And why can he do this now? Why have his powers increased so much since his previous appearances? Well, it's because the world has changed in a way that really favors Xemnu. In his own words, his powers are strongest through a screen, through a culture. And there are so many little televisions now, millions and billions, television in your home, television on your phone, television by your bed, television in your head. Entertainment, news, communication, all of those things are filtered through screens, and Xemnu can control those screens. When he first got to Earth, this was a strong but still limited power, so he needed Xemnu from the Magic Planet to make his plans work. But now, Earth is Xemnu's Magic Planet. Now, I should note, this comic is not just doing the played-out moral that screens are always bad. There's a really important nuance to all this that we're going to get to shortly. But before we get there, there's a little bit more horror we need to cover. Immortal Hulk does not just play up Xemnu's psychological horror elements, it also amps up the body horror too. You might have noticed in a lot of these shots that Xemnu is a weird blend of fur and metal. This has never been detailed greatly, but Xemnu is clearly some sort of cyborg, and that is shown very plainly in Immortal Hulk as the alien feeds. To repair his physical form after a battle, Xemnu needs to consume organic matter. In his own words, he's hungry. Now, it might not seem that terrifying to see this giant thing say that he's hungry, but imagine a monster looking at you, saying that, and then opening up its gut and doing this. Don't get too worried though, this is a survivable process. When Xemnu does this, it actually does not kill the victim. And if you think that sounds scarier than the other option, you'd be right. Immortal Hulk establishes that at some point since his last appearance, Xemnu has taken his old species conversion process that was always his villainous plan and internalized it. This is how he feeds. He sort of skims off excess mass from his victims and then leaves the rest of it as a converted or perhaps partially converted member of his species, which looks, oh boy, they don't look good. Keep in mind, though, Xemnu was not at the top of the heap when it came to this plan. He was recruited to fight the Hulk in this situation by Dario Agger, and Agger had prepared for this kind of thing. He says very clearly that he remembers being mentally shielded against everything that Xemnu could do, meaning that he would be immune to any of the monster's effects. He remembers that. We never actually see him get shielded, but we do see him say he remembers. Tactical error, Mr. Agger. If you are fighting a memory-altering monster who is also smart enough to manipulate people on a global scale, maybe put in some failsafes to make sure that your psychic defenses actually get put in place correctly. I can't show you what Xemnu does to Agger. That would definitely get the video demonetized, but you should go and read Immortal Hulk anyway. I promise you it is fantastic. So how does all of this get resolved? Xemnu is now completely uncontrolled, and the entire planet, save for a very small group of Hulk's friends, remember him as a hero from their childhood, even as he is devouring and converting the population. But Hulk is still around, and he wants round 2, which is going to be complex. In all of their previous fights, Xemnu was not able to bring Hulk down. He could not hypnotize the monster, and as strong as he is not stronger than Hulk, so the fights always ended up the same exact way. But in their first fight during this comic, Xemnu was able to get a deeper look into the Hulk's mind, and this was at a time when it was even more fractured than usual. With this new information, Xemnu was able to figure out not just what the Hulk was, but why the Hulk existed. He had been treating him as a monster, but the Hulk is not just rage. The Hulk is trauma, literally trauma that Bruce Banner experienced when he was young, made manifest by Gamma. So rather than trying to subdue him with calm, Xemnu can subdue him with nostalgia, subdue him with dreams of the childhood Banner wanted, but never was able to have. Once again, quoting Xemnu directly, "My mistake was always treating you as a simple monster, but you're not a monster, Hulk. You are a child, and I am a childhood." With this simple change in tactic, the dynamic is flipped entirely. Xemnu cannot beat the Hulk by forcing chaos into a box, but he can give the chaos what it wanted. He can put Banner and Hulk into this delusion where their childhood was happy, this time where their memories were good, where their father never abused them, and where Xemnu was there watching from the TV screens to oversee it all. But even with this new edge, Xemnu's downfall still came from underestimating the complexity that is Bruce Banner. This man is not simplified to just man and childlike monster, no, there's a lot more in Hulk, and when you suppress the man and you suppress the trauma, the raw rage is what comes out. Turns out that by suppressing both Banner's logic and the childlike savage Hulk's mindless rage, the next thing that rises to the surface is rage with a purpose, and by pushing down 2 alters, the Planet Hulk altar activates and kicks Xemnu's ass. Yeah, the Planet Hulk version, the green scar, that is also a separate altar within Banner's DID system. That thing is even stronger than any of the previous ones, and it is enough to finish Xemnu off. With Xemnu defeated, his hypnosis ended, and as usually happens with him, memories of the incident gradually began to fade from the public's mind for all but those who were very close to the incident itself. Xemnu did survive somehow, probably because he has some sort of healing factor, but has not been a major character since, just a couple one-off appearances again. For how relatively few appearances Xemnu has in total, though, he is an incredibly interesting villain, and his scene with the Hulk right at the end of the book emphasizes the exact nature of the horror that I think makes him work so well. I promised earlier that Xemnu is not just a lazy screens bad type villain, and it is this Hulk fight that makes his actual themes very clear. Xemnu is a villain about the dangers of toxic nostalgia. Screens are the way in which Xemnu preys, because that's often how opinions are communicated in the modern day, but the screens are not the end goal. Hell, look at the way Xemnu talks and the specific lines that he says. He is very actively trying to make people remember their past. Remember how soda used to taste. Remember your first love. Ewoks and bubblegum, 7th grade crushes and long summer evenings. Wasn't everything so much better? He even takes it in a more sinister direction, not calling back to a time when things were good, but drawing attention to how things are worse now. He openly says this when he invokes this idea of a job and family that people hate. The thing that makes this tactic so scary is that it's absolutely real. Now, I'm not saying nostalgia is always a bad thing, of course not, but I am saying that people weaponize nostalgia for their own purposes in the real world all the time. Marketing plays to nostalgia to sell you things. The news terrifies you about the state of the world because that keeps people viewing. Politicians love calling back to the nebulously vague good old days to convince people of whatever they want. Ultimately, you don't have to make a good argument if you can trick people into using their memories to build that argument for you. Xemnu is simply that concept taken to a sci-fi comic book extreme. People are already sneaking their ideas into your nostalgia all the time. What if the thing that snuck its way in was a literal monster? Even the conversion aspect plays into that. Xemnu doesn't kill you, Xemnu changes you. If he gets his hooks into your head, then you become what he wants. I love Xemnu. I mean, I hate Xemnu, but from a writing perspective, I love him. Actually, I love superheroes and horror in general. I think the blending of those two genres is something that needs to happen way more often, and Xemnu is a masterclass in how to do it right. And as a lot of good horror should, this paves the way for me to end this video with a little bit of a moral, probably one of the better morals on this entire channel. Watch out for this sort of tactic. Believe me, it will happen. So the next time a website or an ad or a politician or anyone tries to tell you what you remember, think about it for a second and instead remember Xemnu, and let that memory be a warning. Thank you all so much for watching what was, of course, the 2025 Sir Superhero Halloween special. Can you tell Halloween is my favorite holiday? I wanted to do something special for this, and Xemnu gave me a golden opportunity for that. I do hope you all enjoyed my little immersive horror experience. One more nugget that I need to throw in there about it. Chad Hammer, also not something I made up. That is a callback, but to a different comic. In the series Immortal Thor, also written by Al Ewing, Roxxon and Dario Agger launch a different but similar plot to discredit Thor, kind of like they did for Hulk. This is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, so I didn't have time to go into it in this video, but it involved a fake off-brand Thor named Chad Hammer. So I figured just kind of throwing that in there was another fun Easter egg that made my lie more convincing. Announcements for today. We're gonna start off with normal ones. I have a Patreon. If you go and check that out, you can get early and ad-free access to all of my videos and an exclusive video every month. There's over 3 hours of exclusive content on there and counting. My username there is the exact same as it is here. There's also a link on my channel page and in the description of this video. It's very easy to find, and bonus thank you to everyone who already supports me over there. It really does help me keep making videos like this for you guys. And speaking of help making these videos, I have double artist credits today. First off, as always, thank you to Ruben Perez, the artist who drew the poses of the character you've been watching talk at you for all of this video, but also another shout out to the French Pineapple, who, as I said earlier, is the artist I worked with to make the fake Xemnu from the Magic Planet stills. And to ultimately conclude this video, I will finish with one final thanks, another person that this video truly could not have been made without. I don't even have to say his name, I think we all know. You remember him, don't you?